Hello and welcome back to another edition of Concussion Sub-Series on our YouTube channel. Thanks a lot for all the support, encouragement, and feedback we've been receiving so far. For a change, Suman has taken a break. So I am your host, Sanjay Dubey, with our Concussion Sub Purval Modi with me. Now, we have an extremely special guest today who started as a blogger, moved to making cricketing videos, co-wrote and directed a movie, spent almost 10 years as ESPN Cricinfo's global writer, has worked with T20 teams like St. Lucia Stars, Melbourne Stars, and the Scotland cricket team. He's written a bunch of books. He's a commentator for TalkSport, has had his own radio show. He's also written on football, netball, golf, and athletics, and I could go on and on. Australian at heart, living in London now. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Jarrod Kimber.
How you doing?
All good, Jarrod, all good. Belated happy birthday, first of all.
Oh, thank you.
So thanks to Wikipedia, Jarrod. Thanks to Wikipedia, Jarrod, we came to know about your birthday. So hope you had great birthday yesterday.
Yeah, it was fine. I'm wearing one of my presents now. Someone got me a jumper. It's all good.
Excellent. So let's start with something about how your journey growing up in Australia and how you developed interest in the game. Tell us something about that.
I didn't develop an interest in the game. I was kind of born into the game. My cricket club when I grew up was called Camberfield Cricket Club, and at the period when I was born, they used to call it Kimberfield Cricket Club because my uncle was the president. My father, I think, was vice president. I always get this confused. I think my auntie was the treasurer and my mother was the secretary of the club. So my dad, by that stage, I think my father was a stalwart of the seconds and my two uncles were in the firsts. And, where else was I going to be? There wasn't really another option to do that. And I suppose you either, get on board with it or you disappear. And I just sort of got on board with it.
Did you play in any of the first, second 11? Were you a good batsman, bowler? What did you do?
I was a leg spinning all rounder. I played seconds for Camberfield when I was about 15 or so, and then I went on to try a higher level of cricket after that. It was just a suburban club. Sadly, the club's shut down in the last couple of years, but I went off to play what we call sub-district cricket in Melbourne. Played a few years of that and wasn't particularly good and couldn't really focus on it anyway because I had to work to make a living and most of my job was shift work back in those days. So I would, I remember the last couple of years I played cricket, I would finish work at 6 or 7 in the morning, sleep for 2 hours and then go out and play cricket. And surprisingly enough, it didn't improve my game.
Oh, that's great. Moving on to a bit more serious topic in terms of, what do you think the state of Test cricket is like today and, something about its future? Because it seems that more and more younger people are attracted to the shorter version of the game. And even the bigger teams, they seem to be the only ones who have any commercial viability of playing Test cricket. A lot of the smaller teams don't seem to play as much Test cricket. So is there anything you think we can do to improve the state of cricket in terms of having more followers and everything about it?
I would say right now that Test cricket has never had more followers than it has before in any period of time. There are, if Pakistan played the West Indies in a Test match, there's that famous Test series where those two teams played off against each other and Hanif Mohammed and Garfield Sobers played two of the greatest innings in the history of Test cricket. And there was almost no one there to write about it. There was almost no one there to follow it. I don't think there's not much TV footage. There might be some news footage from that. I can't remember. Now, if Shannon Gabriel plays a stupid shot against Pakistan, everyone in the world knows that Test series has gone on. Everyone in that world knows the narrative of that Test series. People use the Faz's commentary on as their ringtones. So when you say that, young people are going towards limited overs cricket, that's been happening since what, 1982? I don't think that's a particularly new thing. And yet, almost 30 years later, Test cricket is actually still doing quite well. The problem is that Test cricket hasn't been nothing. There have been no significant moves from the people who run Test cricket to ensure that they are making the money from it that they should be, which they aren't. They're leaving lots of money left on the table. And there's no safeguarding of it and I don't mean in terms of, oh, it's the best form of the game. I mean, literally, if you're making money from if a product is worth money, you should be reformatting it so that it continues to be safe and prosperous into the future. They don't do that. So for instance, a West Indian player, I think this might have changed slightly, but up until recently, they were getting about $1,000 to play in a test match, right? And Mitchell Starc gets about $1.3 million, $1.5 million from Cricket Australia. Those numbers are a couple of years old, but I don't think there's been a big change in either of them. Now, they're both doing the same job. And when it comes down to it, it's just because one board has money and one board doesn't have money. But Test cricket on its own actually has a lot of worth within it. And the West Indies are still a part of that. And when Mitchell Starc, in order for Mitchell Starc to be great, he has to bowl out teams like the West Indies, right? So the best thing that they could do is get away from bilateral agreements. They would be bring in a league, make Test cricket a proper league, 7 up, 7 down if they want to, 9 up, 9 down, 15 up and 15 down. I don't care, whatever they have to do, make it more regulated, and then pay the players out of the fees that you get from selling the league. Stop making individual Test playing nations play the league. It's ridiculous that India can play Sri Lanka in a Test series, right? And in that Test series, that India can make $60 million. And all of that money goes back to India, and none of that money goes to the Sri Lankan players. That's not how modern sports works. That's how cricket worked 150 years ago. It doesn't need to be that situation anymore. So the best way is you turn it into a league, you sell it as an overall rights package so that New Zealand aren't losing money, Sri Lanka aren't losing money, Zimbabwe aren't losing money because it's now coming out of a general pool. All the players, all the umpires, all the officials, all the Hawkeye, all that sort of guff gets paid out of the central pot. Okay, and then each individual team obviously gets to chip away at what they want. India will still be the richest team. Australia will still be the 3rd richest team. England will still be the 2nd richest team. They're not going to lose any money, but what will happen is that the next generation of cricketers will all be safeguarded and will be paid. And here's my biggest thing, and I've been saying this for about 10 years now, which is McDonald's haven't discontinued the Big Mac just because we all worked out that it's not the most healthy food in the world. But they do sell salads. And they do try other things, and the Happy Meal became a big thing. And, McDonald's in different parts of the world will do different kinds of things, but you don't get rid of a fundamental part of your business unless it is not working. Test cricket is working. They're just not making enough money off it. And my system would allow them to do that. It would mean that you don't have to convince India to tour all the time anymore because the overall rights would be sold. So if India, Australia, and England wanted to keep playing each other, separate to that agreement, they could also still do that. That's still available to them to be able to do. Not that they even would need to, because they'd still be the richest nations on earth by a long distance. And you could even, if you wanted to, you could say, well, here's the test. Here's this test deal that we have. And it's worth, let's say, my guess is these days, if you had, 6 years of test cricket, you'd be looking at $2.5 billion, right? Of that $2.5 billion, you would take something along the lines of $500 million, and that would pay the players, the umpires, the staging fees, the travel, and all that sort of stuff. I might have my numbers slightly wrong with all that, but that would be my guess. And then you could still say to India, well, we know that you get a bigger chunk of the TV rights, so we're going to give you a slightly bigger chunk because we have now made sure that all the players are paid, that all the staging rights are paid, and then it's up to each individual board to see what they can do on their own from then on in. India are only rich in international cricket because other teams want to come and play them. And, Australia and England have had exactly a similar situation, just not quite to the level of India when it comes to money. So if we can stop that being the reason for Test cricket to be played, if we can stop the fact that poorer teams don't have that money, then that would be the ideal situation. And it wouldn't stop any of the 3 richest nations being by far the richest nations. In fact, they'd probably just go off on their own and play extra series amongst themselves to make more money for themselves, separate to that deal, which is more than fine. But we now have too many test teams for it to be a proper system. We have too many, it costs a lot of money to stage a test, and that money isn't being earned back. But that is, for me, that is just money that is left on the table. There is absolutely no reason why New Zealand versus Pakistan shouldn't be shown all around the world. And at the moment, you know, it was I think it was New Zealand, West Indies. New Zealand put the footage up on YouTube.
Yeah.
There's no reason why that should ever have to happen again. I'm not saying they shouldn't put it up, but you should be selling it to Star or ESPN or whoever it is in one big package, and then they can sell it off to individual markets or do whatever they do. And you're already starting to see those sorts of things happen. You know, New Zealand, I've got this deal with Amazon. I think South African cricket have got this deal with South Africa, but realistically, that still relies on those particular markets being important enough. I think Test cricket is important enough, so it should be in one big package. It's the only way to run it and administrate it properly, make sure all the teams are playing each other, all those sorts of things. You know, it won't happen.
It's a great points, Jarrod. It's quite ironical that New Zealand, who would in all likelihood make the World Test Championship final, but they still lose money hosting a test match against West Indies, and they, because of the commercial aspect, they do not hold any series which is more than 2 test matches. So it's something which I'm sure you know would go a long way. Some of the ideas are simply great.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, it's not that I've invented this and that I'm some genius. I know people within cricket have been talking about these kinds of ideas that I've come up with for a long time. Another one that would help Test cricket is cricket.tv, where we could literally, you could subscribe to it the same way that you do to NBA.tv or MLB.tv or NFL.tv. And you can watch cricket from all around the world. The thing is, think about it this way. If New Zealand are playing Pakistan and you're a Guyanese cricket fan, but you moved years ago to Belgium or to Uzbekistan or to Brazil, chances are you're still going to want to watch that because, I don't know, it's a good time zone for you and you come home from work and it's worth doing and you're interested in that series for some reason. New Zealand can't make any money off that person at the moment. There's a fundamental problem there if you can't make money off the people who want to watch this. And I remember a few years ago, Giles Clark saying illegal streaming is killing cricket. And I think I wrote a piece at the time going, that means he fundamentally doesn't understand what the problem here is, which is more often than not, people aren't being able to get to this thing. And the other thing is, if people are stealing your product, that is actually the absolute best case scenario. That means they are desperate for your product. You should be thinking about that. You know, they always look at it, don't they? In the old days at Blockbuster, what was the most stolen DVD? It was always a big deal because that was the one that younger people were interested in and people just couldn't afford and they were desperate for. That's what you want to happen. The absolute worst case scenario for cricket is no one even tunes into illegal feeds anymore because they don't care. But you can monetize these people. And, you know, I remember Dan Norcross, the BBC commentator a couple of years ago, saying that he had this theory that you could have 2 lots of cricket.tv, right? So you have one, which is a streaming platform that you and me and all the other hardcore fans pay 150 quid, 250 quid, whatever we can afford a year, right? And we get everything we want. Or we just get India, or we just get Nepal, or we just get domestic cricket, whatever we want, we can buy that in our package. But the other option is that you then, as a sport still trying to go around the world, is you offer another thing, which is more like the Spotify model, where any cricket fan in the world can go, but you're constantly pumping ads, like really, really pumping through the ads over and over and over again. Maybe it's on a 5-minute delay. Maybe it's on a 10-minute delay. Maybe it's not on a delay at all. But it's not as good to watch as it would be on a TV, and it's not as good to watch as it would be on your free, on your paid streaming platform. There are options out there. The problem is that no one really runs cricket. It's not run by a group who are trying to make cricket better as a whole. And all these teams keep coming up with these individual ideas and other ideas, and some of them are quite good, but it makes it harder to make it into a league and all bring it together. And that's basically where we are right now.
Wow. I'm sure we could talk about improving Test cricket all day long. Moving on to something different. So Ashes cricket. I know in 2010, 2011, England obviously won the historic Ashes series down under, and you wrote a book about it. Tell us the significance of that victory and what Ashes cricket means to an Australian cricket fan.
Sorry, you just cut out before you said it, but so what series was it you mentioned?
The 2010-2011 Ashes Test series down under.
Oh, okay. I don't know. There's so many Ashes Test series at a certain point. So I wrote a book on 2009 and 2010-11, and you realize how many of them just come and go and don't have a big impact. I suppose what was different about 10-11 was England had sent a really good team out in 2006-07 and had still lost. And it was around the 10-11 period, looking back, I think we now realize the level of professionalism and the quality of the English team had substantially changed. And it's also, it was also a big wake-up call for, well, it should have been a big wake-up call for Australian cricket. It sort of was a big wake-up call. As much as anything can be a big wake-up call for Australian cricket. But there was that moment where they realized they weren't great again. So it was a really interesting series from that point of view. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see where it goes in the sort of the pantheon in 10, 20, 30, 40 years time, especially if England don't win there again for a while, which is very possible with the sort of the bowlers that Australia keep rocking up now. But it was, I suppose for me, I went out there as a, don't want to say a part-time cricket writer. I was certainly a full-time cricket writer, but I was a cricket writer trying to make my career at that point. And I found it an endlessly fascinating series. You had the reclamation project of Chris Tremlett, who ends up being really important. You have Phil Hughes and Steve Smith being thrown back in when they weren't quite ready. You had the incredible start at Adelaide. You had Paul Collingwood swimming on the outfield in Adelaide after they won that test. You had the stuff with KP and Australia convinced that left arm finger spin was going to win them the Ashes. It was a really, really interesting little series. But there's so much Ashes series, a big series, and it wasn't a particularly close one at the end. That I'm not sure how it will go down in the sort of the history of the game, but it was probably one of the more interesting series in the narrative of those two countries than most Ashes series are, because it was the moment. I think Australia might have already lost to South Africa by that point, but they kind of always thought eventually South Africa wouldn't beat them at home again. Losing to England, and it was a team that they really didn't respect that much coming out, was a big change. They had the Argus report off the back of it and everything. And then the other side of it was, it's the first time we realized, I think, just how professional and good that England team was going to be. And we only had them for 3 or 4 years before it all collapsed. But that period of English cricket is the reason they've just won a World Cup. It's probably the reason that they won't be bad at World Cup cricket for the next bunch of years. It's probably the reason why they've got a chance of winning a World T20. And once they sort of start to rebuild their batting lineup back up again, it might be the reason that they're consistently good in Test cricket. That was them taking cricket to a level of professionalism and analysis. And I remember in 13-14 when they lost, I think it was the Sun newspaper put up that England had sent out 49 different people to Australia. And the Sun, being the Sun, was like, 49 losers or something, or what a waste of money, or whatever it was. And I was thinking, they're not as good in 13-14 as it was in 10-11. But but the fact that they're doing that means that they've got jobs for all these people. They're thinking about this on a level that India and Australia hadn't got to at that point. The IPL teams probably were just starting to get to themselves. So, I mean, looking back, it'd be it might end up being a very, very interesting series for that kind of change of, we suddenly realized that Australia was a fundamentally different and fluid team at that point, and that England had, for the first time since late 70s, become a force in cricket again.
Great. My lasting memory of that is on Boxing Day, Australia getting bowled out for 90 odd, and then half of the people leaving the stadium by the end of the day. I've never ever recollect anything like that happening on a Boxing Day.
Well, I mean, Boxing Day could be a weird one anyway. Melburnians are very transport phobic as a general rule. You don't need to give them much for them to leave a sporting event early. Melburnians will turn up to any sporting event ever, but they also will quite often turn up late and quite often leave early. It's almost like they treat sporting events like parties that they're not quite sure they're going to enjoy. But yeah, I mean, look, that day was that day. There was a bunch of days in that particular series that were just absolutely phenomenal. Like the day that Mitchell Johnson swung the ball for the first time, basically in his life. And he comes to the press conference and says, "Yeah, I don't really know how I did that." I mean, just an absolute. He's just destroyed England, and then almost psychologically, at least, said to England, "It probably won't happen again." He got rested out of the series, but he was clearly dropped, and then that became a big deal. You had the sprinkler dance. It was a remarkable thing. I think the problem is, I did a book obviously on the history of Test cricket, and you realize I really didn't want to write too much about Australia-India 2001 and England-Australia in 05. And the reason I didn't want to write about them is because I was like, they can't have been that great of series. There has to have been other incredible series out there that haven't been written about that much. But when you actually dive into the history of Test cricket, you realize that there are a lot of sort of interesting series like 10-11 where things happened and things changed. But the tests weren't particularly close. There was a lack of tension at times. So it might be an interesting series when you're watching it live, but is it the series you're going to tell your grandkids about? No. And you realize that the 01 and 2005 were series that were like that. There was a different tension to them. They were monumental and groundbreaking and things like that happened. And like I remember in the Ashes, and there's been some great Ashes. There've been a lot of Ashes that have come down to the last test. Like 09 was a perfect example. You could say even this most recent one, Australia was up 2-1, it ended up 2-all. There's been a lot of Ashes series that have ended like that. The Basil de Oliveira series doesn't get talked about much from a cricket point of view, but again, comes down to the final test. There's been heaps of series like that in the history of Test cricket, but they don't stick with you the way that 05 and 01 does. And if you want me to go back, was it 1902 was another great series as well in the Ashes. And I think that 10-11 is an intellectual series, whereas I think, 2019 Ashes is going to be, will probably be a little bit more emotional because of other things that have come down to it. And I think that is probably the case. And now more than ever, there are so many series back to back to back. I know it doesn't feel like that because we just had this whole pandemic type deal, but we have had just a phenomenal ratio of tests that it's almost, to think about this, it is very possible that Ben Stokes, it's very possible that Ben Stokes played the second best test innings of all time. In the same year, he also played the second best test innings because we just have so much cricket going on at any one moment that it's almost impossible to, so 2009 Ashes was an interesting series. 2010-11 Ashes was an interesting series. I just don't know how we can keep all that information in our heads anymore, because if anyone who grew up in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, I think I was looking at this the other day. New Zealand was an incredible test playing nation in the 80s, and they played 52 tests. That's an average of 5 tests a year. Come on. Even now, when they have no money and it doesn't work feasibly and no one wants to go and play them, they play more tests than that. Things have fundamentally changed within our game.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Excellent.
What an insight, really. So, Jarrod, query or question from my side is, so what, do you see there's possibility of cricket getting implemented along with the Olympic Games? And what are the challenges which you see coming forward if it's implemented along with the Olympics?
Yeah, I think it'll go into the Olympics. I think the Olympics are desperate for it. The Olympics have been really upset for quite some time that India don't give a shit about the Olympics. They don't really understand it. Everyone sees India as this incredible market coming through. I think in cricket, we know about it obviously a lot more. And, you know, anyone like us who's followed India knows that India has fundamentally changed as a country, well, since early 90s, perhaps through to now. You know, the building of the Indian middle classes, the economic growth, I know hasn't gone too well for Modi of recent times, but, you know, but for a long time, it's still, you know, compared to where it was in the 90s, it's a fundamentally different country. So we know there's going to be a burgeoning middle class. We know that the parts of India that were almost unattainable before going to want to watch Premier League football and NBA and, you know, going to gonna stream cricket and all those sorts of things. So it's a huge market coming through, and the Olympics are sitting there going, there's 1 billion people here. India has been catastrophically bad at the Olympics. I cannot underplay how disappointed I am with India at the Olympics. Like, if I was an Indian, I would just be banging my head and just going, how can we have, I mean, Kerala should be one of the best Olympic places on earth, let alone, like, if you compare Kerala to Brisbane, right? Brisbane has probably had, I don't know how many gold medals Brisbane has had just in swimming, right? Kerala has natural athletes, a beautiful climate, and tons of people, right? And yet Brisbane manages to do it and Kerala doesn't. And you've got, you know, this whole thing. I remember a friend of mine saying to me, you know, trying to justify it and go, you got to understand that Indian athletes are different to other athletes. And I was just like, that's just nonsense. It's like when people used to say, oh, you know, Chinese people won't be good in the NBA unless they're 7'2". And then, you know, Jeremy Lin comes along. It's absolute, that sort of stuff is absolute nonsense. The Olympics is desperate for this. Right? If you think about it on a very basic scale, how many countries on earth don't care about the Olympics? There are so few out there that don't, right? And yet, what does India make up? 15% of the global market of sports fans. If you can't get them in and can't get them watching and can't get them, cricket is a pathway to that. In the same way that you will see these American, places like The Athletic and Bleacher Report and SB Nation and Locked On and The Ringer, and New York Times, Washington, all those places will start to work out that cricket is a gateway into India. It allows you to get into that market that you don't understand. And trust me, having worked for ESPN, I can tell you Americans do not understand India as a culture, as a country. They don't understand cricket that much better, but they certainly don't understand India. So they're going to start to work that out. And the Olympics has already worked that out. The Olympics is kind of doing everything they can. A couple of years ago, the Olympics was really standoffish to cricket. They were basically saying, look, we're not even going to let you in. Even if you want to come in, we're not going to let you in because your women are terrible. The standard of women's cricket is absolutely not up to scratch. There are not 8 good teams, and we are not letting a sport in unless the women are really good. Let me tell you, women's cricket has changed massively, but even if it hadn't, the Olympics would have still have changed their mind on all of that. They would have completely backtracked on that now because they just realized that they just haven't been able to get into that market. So it's a no-brainer for the Olympics to do that. They'll be able to sell at a higher price to India going forward in TV rights. Social media, as we all know, India is absolutely crazy on, so that's another thing the Olympics want to take forward. Also, I think there is a certain point where for a very, very long time, I think cricket and the Olympics had this sort of, you got to remember, cricket was the first major modern sport that was bigger than the Olympics. And I think there's always been this weird sort of, cricket has sort of thought, we don't need the Olympics, and Olympics is going to be like, we don't need cricket. Fundamentally now, both of the sports need each other. I would say that cricket has always needed the Olympics. It was just too arrogant and stupid to notice. But that is the case. So we're talking about the Olympic side of things. Let's talk about the cricket side of things. If you are an Australian, English and Indian fan, and you're a male cricket fan, and you don't really give a shit about anything else, I can understand if you sit there and go, it's too much cricket played. Paul Newman from the Daily Mail has said this on Twitter and written the pieces about it over and over and over again. With all due respect to Paul, it's an absolute nonsense argument, because if you have ever spent any time talking to anyone from an associate nation, if you have ever spent any time talking to a woman who plays cricket. And more importantly, if you've ever spent any time talking to anyone from disability cricket, you will know that they are absolutely desperate for this to happen. I don't know if you guys know, but the ICC does not run disability cricket. And do you know who runs it? Basically no one. Because there is a deaf disability cricket, there is a blind disability cricket, there is a intellectual disability cricket, there is a wheelchair disability cricket, there is a physical disability cricket. All of these can't even call, they had a World Cup in 2019, they couldn't call it a World Cup, and 5 teams turned up for the physically challenged World Series. I can't even remember the name. It's such a stupid name, I can't remember it, right? Once that gets into the Olympics, straight away, countries around the world are going to get together. The ICC is going to have to get together, or someone else is going to come together and bring all these disability bodies together and go, we're going to have to, let's make sure every one of us, every 4 years, we have this. Let's make sure that we share administration costs. Let's make sure that we share social media costs, whatever it is to bring all these different disability crickets together. Now, if that's disability cricket, we know that, you know, through the Paralympics, that's going to get a huge shot in the arm straight away. Not to mention that countries like Australia, England, New Zealand, probably South Africa, maybe India, maybe Pakistan are going to be like, get a few medals here. You know what I mean? If you invested, if the BCCI invested $20 million in disability cricket before an Olympics, I might be able to win all 5 disability gold medals. Or sorry, if you count the women, all 10 disability gold medals straight away. You know, it's a ridiculous situation, but it wouldn't take that much to do that, right? So then so disability cricket, absolutely no brainer, has to be in it. Then you've got women's cricket. Women's cricket has been, I mean, I started covering women's cricket casually in 2012. There is now the quality of women's cricket at the domestic level in Australia is now stronger than it was at the international level in 2012. The ability for them to hit sixes, I mean, in 2012, there was just so many women around the world that didn't have strong throwing arms. Running between wickets, strength training, all those sorts of things has just gone through the roof. Now, on top of that, we now have a Brazilian women's cricket team that are professionals. I mean, what a mind-blowing thing we had in cricket. We have a Thai women's cricket team, which is, if they're not professionals, they're at least semi-professionals, and they will be professionals within the next couple of years. That means that countries around the world are starting to realize that you can actually improve your women's team before your men's team. But we also know that there are problems. Afghanistan still don't have a women's cricket team because of political issues. I'm not sure that maybe can't be overcome by the Olympics. But if Afghanistan start to think we're a sneaky chance of a medal here, again, maybe things change there. But Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, India, all of which should be stronger in women's cricket than they currently are. They might all start to invest in this. Ireland, is another team that will, if cricket comes in the Olympics, will be like, where are we more likely to win a medal? Huge boost for women's cricket. And then the associates, all the associates around the world. I love it when someone says, oh, it's too much cricket played these days. I was like, I'm not sure, my man from Oman feels that way. Do you know what I mean? I'm not sure that all the cricketers feel that way. And it's getting better at the sort of the higher end of associate cricket. They're certainly getting to a point now where I think those guys from the USA and Scotland and Netherlands and Oman and Papua New Guinea are starting to feel like they're playing a lot of cricket. But realistically, Uganda are not playing a lot of cricket. And they're an improving cricket team. And the Singapore team is an improving cricket team, and they're not playing a lot of cricket. That's where you need to go. The Olympics allows extra funding. It allows for, the way that sporting bodies think that it's like, we can just pump money in here and we're a chance of getting something. It allows you access to government training facilities and all sorts of things that a lot of these associate nations just do not have. Plus, look at some maybe Scotland's the wrong one, but look at Papua New Guinea, right? What an incredible thing that would be if the next time there's an Olympic Games and Charles Amini is walking through the stadium holding the flag because he's Papua New Guinea's greatest athlete. We have seen what basketball you know, if you have a good basketballer, the sort of way that the Olympics helps, even if your team is obviously not going to beat the USA, but you suddenly have your nation's best basketballer holding the flag or getting extra publicity, what that can do for the sport. I just think that it's an absolute no-brainer. So the biggest arguments before were England didn't want it because it would ruin one of their summers. I mean, you're already rich, shut up. People would say things like, the West Indies won't want it because they'll have to be split up. West Indies actually completely supported the Commonwealth cricket. And once people started asking people in the West Indies if they cared, they were like, no, of course, we'd love it. Bring it on. It's a really interesting thing for them because the islands get to play as themselves at the higher level for once. You know, what a huge moment that was. It was Viv Richards who carried the flag at the Commonwealth Games. So those are the two ones. The other team that would have to be split up is Ireland. Again, Ireland is just like, we have to be split up, but we can appear at the Olympic Games. It's a huge thing. And I think the other one was that cricket is trying to run itself and thinks it's a genius and it doesn't want to be involved with the IOC stuff and extra WADA stuff and all those sorts of things that come with being in the Olympics. To that, I would say you have the chance to fundamentally change what your sport is. I was chatting to someone the other day about in 1910 we decided to come up with the ICC, and the reason they came up with the ICC was to have a tri-series between Australia, South Africa, and England. Up until the late 1800s, Ireland was still a really, really good cricket team. In 1905, USA had perhaps the best bowler in the world in Barton King, but if not the best bowler, certainly a great, great bowler. Argentina into 1920s and 1930s, I would argue, and I have many times, that they were almost as strong as New Zealand, if not maybe stronger than New Zealand at that point. Imagine we had given all those teams test status and we had encouraged them and pushed them. I reckon by 1950, you probably have 20 top cricket teams around the world, maybe 30, maybe 40. By 1980, instead of us having 8 good teams, 7 good teams, whatever it was back then, we might have had 25 good teams. And by 2000, we might have had 100 teams who are playing professional cricket all around the world and improving. We are so far behind. We should be doing whatever we can in cricket to fix that. And the Olympics is the absolute easiest idiot guide to fix those inequities that we built into the game.
Wow. I mean, from an India perspective, obviously playing in the Olympics would be almost guaranteed at least one medal, like the bronze medal. I'm sure we'd be good enough to get it. So
you'd think so. Between men and women, you would think India would win one medal. You would think that, as I said, a little bit of investment wins them a bunch of disability medals. Why not?
Yeah.
And to be fair, I think the Indians are now thinking that way. I think before it was just this, cricket just had this incredible arrogance to it. And I think now it's just like, I don't know if you've ever heard it. There's this constant argument about where cricket is in the global landscape. Is it the world's second biggest sport or not? And you get this over and over and over again. And it's like, realistically, basketball probably has it covered. And, you could make interesting arguments for sports like tennis and the NFL and a few different other ones out there. But realistically, if cricket isn't the second biggest sport in the world at the moment, then it's done that to itself.
Wow. Yeah. I remember in 1998, we had the Commonwealth, but, you had cricket in Commonwealth where people were sending, A teams and not necessarily everyone embraced it as much. So hopefully there'll be a day when we have cricket in the Olympics in T20 format, not very far from now.
I think fundamentally, it's important that I note this, that the Commonwealth Games is bullshit and I hate it. Continue.
All right, moving on to something, in terms of your association with different T20 teams like the Melbourne Stars, St. Lucia Stars. So what does the role of an analyst entail? Do cricketers come to you during every match trying to understand matchups, etc.? What do people do with the laptops in the dugout? Just want to get some insight of, what an analyst does in the cricketing setup.
During the game, you provide little things, but during a T20 game, it moves so fast and so many things happen that, I mean, you occasionally get the captain or the coach come up to you and say something. And maybe if there's a player not playing, he might come up to ask you a question just because he's interested in something. But during a game, you're on your laptop, you are logging the game. So that can mean a bunch of different things. It might be logging video. I usually logged data because I didn't have access to the video in the games that I was playing in. So straight ball, short ball, length ball, this shot, they got this many runs, and then a note at the end so I can go through it. There was a drop catch off this one. We did good fielding off this one, which was saved us a run. We did bad fielding off this one, which cost us three runs. And then at the end, I can go through and very easily go through my notes and tell the story through data and then match it up with individual notes that I have made, and can also go to the coaches and write a report and that sort of thing. But essentially, when it comes down to it, I see that job as, and this is how I saw it when Cricket Scotland asked me to come on board. I said, look, forget about analyst and all that sort of nonsense. The best way to sell it to the players is I will do the due diligence. Right? I will go out and find out the information that you guys can't find out, or just don't know how to find out, or haven't even thought about yet. And I will come back to you, and I will. So generally, as an analyst, my job certainly has been, for most of the time I've been an analyst, has been to present to the bowling team, the bowling unit. Although in some cases you do it to the whole team, just depending on how things go. I prefer to have the batsman there because batsmen are very good at reading other batsmen, but sometimes batsmen do not give a shit and don't want to be there. And some teams just want it to be the bowlers. They want the bowlers to figure it out. But I would give a display to the bowlers. I try and make it as visual as I can and just be like, okay, this is what this guy does. This is how I think this works. Let's open it up. Anyone else got any ideas? They say something and I know it's fundamentally wrong. I'll go, oh, that's interesting, but maybe we should focus on this for this particular game. They say something and I'll be like, I think that's really good. Why don't we think about that being plan B if plan A hasn't worked? And I try and make it a discussion, only because, as I've said to these cricketers over and over again, they're just like, they see you as coming in and telling them what to do. And I was just like, all this stuff is in your brain. It's just that you don't know how to get it out yet. I will help you get it out of your brain, and then I suppose, you work a lot with captains and coaches. And then the other thing that you do is I try and stay as visible as possible. I try and work in the hotel bar or in the hotel lobby or, somewhere they're going to have to walk past me, because the players, I think, feel a little bit uncomfortable. If I've never worked with an analyst before, and most of the jobs I've had, they hadn't had an analyst like me work for them before. You want it to be as casual as possible. You want them to come past and they're on the way back from dinner and they see you and they see you work and they come up and they sort of go, I've been thinking about bowling around the wicket. What do you think? Let's have a look. Have a look at the numbers. Bang. Or they'll be even more shy and they'll be like, oh, what are you looking at? Oh, and I'll just sort of say, oh, I've been looking at whatever I think they need to know that they haven't asked for yet. and I'll say, oh, I've been talking about first 5 strike rates. I mean, which batsmen are really good at it and which batsmen are really slow at it. Oh, what's mine? 68. Oh, where does that go? Well, it's about 100 behind Luke Runke. And then we discuss it, and they'll tell me why they do it, and I'll tell them how I think they can up it without putting any more risk on it. And they'll say that they think it will work in the long run. And I say, have you thought about how it impacts the batsman at the other end? And then we discuss these things, and, next time they come up and then, and they'll take what they want, but you want them to be continually thinking about the game and how to improve it. And what a lot of the analytics that I have allows them is to think about the game in a way that they fundamentally have not thought about before. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm literally trying to say to them, here it is. You've never even thought about this moment. And then sometimes they'll come up to me and they'll go, can we look into this? I remember one player saying something really interesting at a meeting one time where he just said, we were talking about how easily we had scored singles off the spinners. And he said, but it's just easier to score singles off the spinners. And I was like, is that right? So I went and had a look at it, and the number of singles scored off spinner, or the dot, I think it was singles off spinners and pace bowls in T20 was exactly the same. But this player was scoring double the amount. He just didn't have any dot balls. So almost every dot ball from a spinner, he was turning into a single. And so he had this huge ratio of it. So I went back to him and I said, I don't know how this helps your game or not, but this is what I found. And he was completely gobsmacked. And he said, so it's not easier for everyone. It's just easier for me. And I said, yes. And then we talked about whether he could improve his single ratio of seam bowlers. It's just a combination of a bunch of that. That's how I try and do it. I try and look at it as a coaching tool, as an improvement tool, as a way for us to learn more, and as a way for me to get more information out of the players' brains. One of the best chats I've ever had in cricket was with Kieran Pollard. And I was just like, you don't get to be Kieran Pollard without having so much of this stuff already in your brain, right? But how do I get it out of your brain so we can help the 22-year-old kid that doesn't have it? And how do I get it out of your brain so that we then get it in a position where it benefits us as a team more, rather than it just being this, in this brain of yours? That is part of the way I see the analyst role, which is probably slightly different from a pure number crunching role. I see it as an improvement tool. I see it as due diligence, and I see it as a way of improving your cricket team through discussions.
Oh, wow.
Wow. So, Jarrod, the last question which I would have from my side is, what do you think, the innovations in T20 cricket? Are there any more scopes? And what do you think about these changes or innovations made specifically in the Big Bash League right now?
Well, there'll certainly be a lot more changes coming. I mean, the way that teams play will fundamentally change. We have one Andre Russell. We will have 25 Andre Russells in the next couple of years. Teams are still fundamentally playing it like it is cricket. And when it comes down to it, it is a completely different format of cricket. You talk about the Big Bash. I remember talking to a couple of analysts after it started, and I haven't even looked into this. I haven't followed the Big Bash as closely this year. And I said to him, I bet you overs 5 and 6 are really slow now. And he's like, yep. We both knew that. I didn't even need to check it. I knew that overs would be 5 and 6 would be really slow because they're no longer power play overs, and batsmen would do the exact same thing they always do. Once the power play finishes, they slow down. That sort of stuff. I remember looking at a player once whose strike rate in the power play was 164, and his strike rate over the next 6 overs was 92. You will not be able to do that in 5 years' time. Teams will stop picking you, or they will say, "What if we see you not slogging, we will run you out or retire you," right? So those things will change massively. We've already seen, I talk a lot about Benny Howe, but Mustafizur Rahman, Benny Howe, Pat Brown, what I would call the fast spinners, are already happening. They are fundamentally unlike anything we've had in bowling. We had one guy like that. I think it was Bob Appleyard, was it, in the 1950s? And we had Sid Barnes, and a few of those guys played in, 100 years ago. But that format of bowling had changed. Essentially, bowling really fast cutters had changed. It just didn't exist anymore. Outside of occasionally you would do it in India, and occasionally you would do it in England in first-class cricket. That is back, and will continue to develop until bowlers, you won't be able to tell. I mean, fundamentally, Benny Howe is a spin bowler more than he is a seam bowler, right? That is just a mind-blowing thing. So you get batsmen who are hitting more. You will get a whole new hybrid of types of bowlers. And one of my favorite things is, why does every finger spinner in the world not bowl the knuckleball? And I thought this before Sunil Narine bowled it, and I think it even more now. It's like most finger spinners have big, ginormous hands, and the knuckleball is a really, really interesting ball to bowl. It does something different. Even if batsmen can pick it out of the hand, I don't know how much you know about the physics of a cricket ball, but it behaves in such a different way because it doesn't spin back. Every spinner in the world, every finger spinner in the world should be able to bowl the knuckleball at any time and land it exactly where they want. And at the moment, it's 2, 3, maybe 5 of them are doing it regularly. So there's 3 things that I've come up with off the top of my head. When you talk about those changes, I think I wrote a blog at the time basically saying that you fundamentally, if you want to improve T20 cricket, there is a bunch of changes you could do. Here's one off the top of my head that I've been thinking about that I haven't written about yet, which is, okay, you want to make it so that there are no lull periods in T20 cricket. For the first 5 overs, have 2 men out. For the next 5 overs, have 3 men out. For the following 5 overs, have 4 men out. And for the last 5 overs, have 5 men out. You might then be able to gerrymander what T20 TV companies want, which is they want it to be exciting from beginning to end, right? There is a way of doing that. What the Big Bash has done, and it was my friend Trent Wood who came up with the ideas, is basically the Big Bash came to him and said, look, the TV ratings aren't working these periods. How do we fix it? He came up with a bunch of ideas. They picked some that are fundamentally stupid and don't work. And they picked the 2 over 1 at the end, which I think sort of changes the nature of the game, but it does what they wanted it to do, which is it puts in 2 supernova overs. And it also gives you that little bit before. But realistically, I've said this before, if T20 cricket ends up with 15 players, 10 of which you bat and 5 of which you bowl, I think it would be a better game of cricket. If we changed fielding restrictions, as I've just talked about. You know, there are many different things we can do. These particular changes are the sorts of changes that are made when cricket boards and TV companies are worried about lull moments. Forget your lull moments, man. If you just want people to slog the whole innings, just allow 10 batsmen who can all slog. Done. That will fundamentally do what they want it to do. You know, we're sticking with all these stupid little things like the power play. We don't need a power play, as I just said. 5 overs, 5 overs, 5 overs, 5 overs. Change it, and then you'll have specialist batsmen who are really good when there are 2 players out, and specialist batsmen who are really good when there are 5 players out, and then you have AB de Villiers and Andre Russell who it won't matter to them, right? You will be able to have, and then, you know, if you want to get rid of the overs like the 100 will do, again, I don't mind that. If Jason Behrendorff is only good for the first 30 balls of the innings, let him bowl all 30 of them. If Rashid Khan is so good that he can bowl 60 balls a night, let him bowl 60 balls a night. That's awesome. There are different things we can have. One of my pet peeves with one-day cricket, and it's even worse in T20 cricket, is what I call the Scott Styris overs. If there's a pitch that helps Scott Styris because it's keeping a bit low or the ball's swinging around, I love the fact that Scott Styris can bowl. But if Scott Styris has to bowl in every game and I have to watch his slow, putrid, medium-paced nonsense, right? Why? I want the best bowlers to go up against the best batsmen. I want to see that in that particular format of cricket. And we can make all those changes. They are fundamentally better changes that would improve the game. I think it would make it more exciting. You could have a proper substitution rule as well. You know, whatever you want to do. And instead cricket makes these half changes. And it's just a pain in the ass, really.
Great. I think before we wrap up, we'll have a very quick quiz, Purval. It'll be only 4 or 5 questions. We'll test you. I think you'll kill it probably, Jarrod.
Probably not, but we'll see how we go.
Yep. So, Jarrod, the first question is, who was the first player to accumulate 100 runs and take 10 wickets in the same match? Australian player.
100 runs and 10 wickets in the same match. Was it George Giffen?
No, I'll give you one shot. So in first inning, he scored 40 runs and second inning, he scored 80 runs and totally he took 11 test wickets, 11 wickets in the match.
It feels like something that should have been done early on. I mean, George Giffen was the first all-rounder, which is probably why I went with him. Trying to think of another good all-rounder they had. Monty Noble?
Nope. So it was Alan Davidson from Australia, and he scored 44 runs and 80 runs in second innings, and totally in whole match he took 11 wickets against West Indies in Brisbane in 1960 and 1961 series.
I had no idea that was the first one. That's really late for that to have happened in cricket, but that is not why that test match is famous. If you want a trivia question, why is that test match famous?
So it was famous for Garfield Sobers. No, it was famous for Garfield Sobers, correct?
Nope.
He scored.
No, it was the first tied test, correct?
Test,
first tied test.
I got it.
There you go. So incredible that happened. I had 2 brilliant moments, for cricket that had never happened beforehand. And also a little bit disappointed in Monty Noble.
Okay. So the second question is, This player made his international debut on 10th of November 1998 against Pakistan, and he was born in England, but he chose to play for Australia.
Would that be Andrew Simons?
Perfect.
There haven't been many people born in England played for Australia. So, I mean, what?
Okay, so a tough one is coming ahead. All right.
Mhm.
So we all know Matthew Hayden scored 380 against Zimbabwe in Perth in 2003. How many boundaries did he hit in that 380?
Oh, I mean, there's no way I will ever get that right, obviously. Well, let's have a look at that. 380. So he's boundary hitter. So 60. What's that? 10, 15. 47 boundaries.
No, he just nearly missed it. It is 49. So he
Oh
hit
my
38
God.
fours.
Great guess. Great.
I should get. I think I'm correct. I think that if I remember back, they gave him a couple there that he shouldn't have got. It was there was some umpiring errors. I'm claiming.
Yeah.
So he hit 38 boundaries and 11 sixes, and that was a world record which of broken, like Brain Lara's world record of 375, which was broken by Matthew Hayden.
Cool.
So next question is, this person, this player was the first player to wear a motorcycle helmet while betting.
Oh. It's an English guy, isn't it?
Yes, he's an English guy, very famous commentator as well.
Are you talking actual motorcycle helmet? So you're not talking about the first helmet. You're talking about specifically the first motorbike helmet.
Yes, motorcycle helmet.
I think the first person to wear one was probably John Edrich, but I think the answer you're looking for is Tony Gregg. But players had worn helmets of varying kinds before then, including putting stuff under their hats at times over the years. Was it the motorcycle helmet that they couldn't hear the calls? That was the problem with that. You couldn't hear the call properly from the other end, and it caused runouts hilariously. And there was there not an equestrian helmet, I think, worn? And I think players also might have worn a rugby, the rugby sort of padded things as well. But there you go. You asked one question, I got it right, and then I went on for a little while.
Yep. And the last question is, which two Australian batsmen saved the defeat of Hobart in 1999 against Pakistan with a remarkable 238 run, 6 wicket?
I'll just stop you there. It's Langer and Gilchrist. Langer was probably out caught behind early on. And then that was the innings that changed everything for Gilchrist, I think. Although he was brilliant in the first test, but that was where people just went, this is not how a number 7 is supposed to bat.
Yep. So Langer scored 127 and Gilchrist scored his first century, which was 127, and Gilchrist scored his first century, which was 149.
Yeah, it was. I reckon it was 149. Okay, there's something about that where he should have got his 150, but the ball didn't go to the boundary, and because they ran, well, I can't remember what it is, but he should have got 150. And he didn't get it. Anyway, he won the test, so good for him.
Yep.
Excellent, Jarrod. This is excellent. You've been very generous with your time. Thank you very much, and I hope you had a good time enjoying this chat with us. And I hope our listeners have had really great time listening to this interesting bit of chat with Jarrod. Jarrod, great. Thanks a lot for your time.
No worries. Cheers, guys. Have a good one.
Cheers.
Bye.
Take care. Thank you. Bye.